The quiet street where I taught my daughter to ride a bike was never meant for danger. But one night, everything changed. The sound of a roaring truck shattered the calm. A truck marked with fake HOA enforcement lights. They weren't police, but they'd become a threat. One I couldn't ignore. Before I start let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching this from. I read every single one, and I'd love to give you a personal thank you for being here. The engine roared down the block with purpose, not like any ordinary car, but something powerful and ominous. I had a bad feeling the second I stepped out on the porch. Down the street, I saw headlights swing too low, then the lurch of a black pickup with flashing lights mounted to the roof. Clearly not official. This wasn't a patrol, it was a threat. Emma was still outside, her back turned, focused on her phone, unaware of what was barreling toward her. I shouted her name, but the engine drowned me out. The truck didn't slow. It swerved across the lawn and aimed straight for her. I felt time stretch in slow motion, my heart racing as I watched Emma freeze for half a heartbeat. She tried to jump out of the way, but her bike tipped over, and she was tangled in the handlebars. My boots hit the porch steps, and my legs carried me with every ounce of urgency, but I knew I wouldn't reach her in time. The truck slammed into her. The sickening thud of the bumper colliding with her hip echoed through my bones, and the rear tire rolled over both of her legs. Her scream cut through me, louder than any explosion I'd ever heard overseas. I was frozen, but the shock of it was quickly replaced by the training I'd learned from years in combat. I couldn't afford to wait for help. I had to act now. Instinct took over as I sprinted for the locked gun case by the door. I yanked it open, my hands moving on old muscle memory. The click of the code unlocking the box, the cold steel of the Glock, felt both familiar and terrifying. I stepped out onto the lawn, eyes focused on the truck, which was already revving its engine, ready to come back around for another pass. I took my stance by the mailbox, lined up the front sight, and fired a single round into the truck's left tire. The sound of it blowing apart was like a burst of hope. The truck swerved uncontrollably, fishtailing into a neighbor's flower bed, bringing the chaos to a halt. For now, there was a moment of eerie silence after the truck stalled. I turned toward Emma. She was still on the ground, sobbing, her legs twisted in ways that no child should ever experience. As the truck's engine sputtered, a man in a cheap tactical vest jumped out. He was armed, a shotgun in hand. "Put the gun down!" he shouted with a bullhorn, his voice shaking. His words didn't make me blink, but the sight of him, this imposter, made my blood run cold. I didn't flinch. "Drop the weapon," I said in a calm, even voice. "This ends now." I stayed focused, every breath calculated. Behind me, the sound of sirens was approaching, but the man hesitated, unsure of how far to push this. The longer he hesitated, the closer the law got to us. As the sirens grew louder, I backed away from the standoff, my gun still trained on the man. His hesitation had been enough for me to advance toward Emma. I knelt beside her, feeling the weight of her grip on my arm. She was in pain, but she was also scared. Scared of what was happening, but even more afraid of what was still coming. "Stay with me, kiddo," I said, my voice softer than I felt. "You're safe now." I could hear the truck's engine still idling, its occupants waiting for an opportunity to do more damage. I stayed between them and my daughter, trying to shield her from the nightmare unfolding before us. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The officer arrived, the flashing lights cutting through the heavy night air, signaling the end of this round of the fight. But it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. I still hadn't seen the face of the man behind the truck, the man whose voice I had recognized from somewhere deep in my past. Billy Kane. I wasn't sure how or why he had come to be part of this, but I knew one thing for sure. I was facing a threat that went beyond just my family. This wasn't just about protecting Emma anymore. It was about exposing a truth that had been buried beneath the surface of our quiet suburban lives. It was about revealing a corruption that would stop at nothing to tear everything apart. I didn't tell Emma about the voice on the radio. I didn't want to scare her more than she already was. But the truth was, I was scared too. There was something in that voice that I recognized, something that chilled me to my core. I spent the night thinking of Billy Kane, the man I once trusted in battle, now standing on the wrong side of this fight. The next day, I did what I had to. I reached out to an old friend, Josh Whitmore. His connections could dig up answers quietly, and that's what we needed. We needed to find out who Billy Kane really was, what he had become. We needed to get ahead of the storm that was brewing in our backyard. Josh's intel came fast, but not fast enough. Billy Kane had been active with a crew of fake HOA enforcers, a string of shady dealings going back to a lost property tax dispute years ago. He was dangerous. The discovery hit me hard. This wasn't a random group of bullies. These were organized criminals hiding in plain sight, using power to control people, intimidate neighbors. And now they had my daughter in their sights. The man who had once been my brother in arms was now my enemy. And what hurt the most? The knowledge that Billy wasn't just making mistakes. He was choosing this path, and that made him even more dangerous. That evening, I walked Emma through what was happening. I could see the weight of it settle on her face. She was no longer just an innocent teenager looking for justice. She was a soldier in a battle that none of us could avoid anymore. We can't run from this, I told her. This fight is ours now. She nodded, her jaw set with a determination that mirrored my own. The next night, we both took our positions. Emma, poised with her phone to capture the next round of the fight. Me standing watch, always aware of the threat that loomed. The black truck appeared again, but this time we were ready. We were no longer just waiting for them to make a mistake. We were forcing them to, and we were going to shine a light on the darkness they tried to keep hidden. Emma went live again, her camera capturing every moment, every word. The truck slowed in front of our house. The passenger yelled through a loud hailer, warning us of fines. Emma didn't flinch. She stood her ground, calling them out for what they were. Imposters, bullies hiding behind fake badges. You're harassing families, she said into the camera. We've reported you. I stood behind her, my gaze steady, watching them with cold resolve. But then, something unexpected happened. As the truck drove off, the passenger threw something out of the window. Another yellow envelope. Emma carefully picked it up, the camera capturing the Polaroid photo inside, the same shot of our porch from the night before. And written across the bottom, "Next time we knock." The realization hit us like a punch to the gut. We were no longer just dealing with bullies. We were dealing with predators. I couldn't hide the anger this time. The message was clear, this wasn't a mistake. They weren't just throwing out fines. They were hunting us. It had moved beyond threats and fake fines. The line had been crossed. My daughter was in danger. That's it, Emma, I said, my voice low, dangerous. We're going to put an end to this. Her jaw tightened. How? We go to the police. We make sure this gets out to everyone. We knew it wasn't going to be easy, but we had no choice. The moment they threw that envelope, we understood that they wanted a fight. Now it was time to give them one. The next day, I gathered all the evidence. Polaroids, video footage, the handwritten threats, and my own encounter with the truck. I knew I needed more than just my word to bring them down. I couldn't do this alone. Josh had already started pulling information on the HOA board, tracking possible connections between the enforcers and higher-ups. I didn't want to wait any longer. I called Officer Carla Ruiz, asking her to meet me. She arrived at the house and I laid everything out for her, every piece of proof. She was quiet, taking in the gravity of the situation. We'll make sure this goes public, she said, her eyes hardening. They won't get away with this. Emma wasn't about to sit on the sidelines. She wanted her live stream to be more than just a voice for justice. She wanted it to be the truth. The real truth that no one could deny. So we set up the camera again. This time we weren't hiding. We were standing tall. She spoke directly to the camera, explaining everything that had been happening. How the HOA enforcers had harassed the entire neighborhood. How they targeted her for speaking out, and how they tried to run her over. The tension in the air was palpable. For the first time, we weren't just talking to a screen, we were talking to the world. And that was the moment things started to change. The next morning, the story went viral. News outlets picked it up, and the local community began to rally behind us. Neighbors who had stayed silent for so long came forward with their own stories. Fines, threats, intimidation. It wasn't just us. It was everyone. People from the street, people from the surrounding areas. All of them had been living under the same shadow. The next thing I knew, Emma and I were meeting with a reporter. Her name was Dana Ellis, and she understood the gravity of what we were up against. She didn't just want the story. She wanted justice. And with her help, our small fight had turned into something bigger than we ever imagined. The courthouse buzzed with tension on the day of the trial. Emma, still recovering from her injuries, insisted on attending. I wheeled her in, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't seem like my little girl. She seemed like a warrior. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors, reporters, even strangers who had been following the story. The prosecution laid out the case clearly. Every piece of evidence was presented, and when Billy Kane's name was spoken, the room fell silent. No one in that courtroom doubted anymore. The truth had been revealed. This wasn't just about one family. It was about an entire community. And the world was finally listening. When Billy Kane took the stand, I saw something I hadn't expected. Regret. He wasn't the man I remembered. His eyes were hollow, his posture slumped. But there was still that arrogance, that belief that he could talk his way out of anything. He tried to frame the entire situation as a mistake, as a decision gone wrong. But the jury wasn't fooled. The photos of Emma's injuries, the hospital reports, and the body cam footage all told a story that no excuse could cover. Billy Kane wasn't a man who'd made a mistake. He was a man who had chosen this path, and now he would face the consequences. The verdict came quickly. Billy Kane was found guilty of aggravated assault, conspiracy, and child endangerment. Reyes and Connor, the other men involved, were also convicted of impersonating law enforcement and multiple counts of harassment. The room exhaled in unison. The battle had been won, but the war wasn't over. Emma's face was pale, but when the gavel fell, there was a flicker of relief in her eyes. She squeezed my hand, not smiling, but there was a weight lifting from her shoulders. The courtroom may have cheered for justice, but for me, this was just one step toward healing. There was still work to be done. The months that followed were slow, healing in their own way. Emma recovered, physically, from the accident. Her leg braces slowly turned to crutches, and eventually, she walked without them, though there was always a slight limp. It didn't stop her, though. Her courage didn't come from her legs. It came from her heart. Meanwhile, Lakeview began to change. The HOA board was dissolved, the corrupt enforcers taken down, and real security measures put in place. But it wasn't just the neighborhood that had changed. Emma and I had both learned something about standing up for what's right, even when it costs everything. One evening, nearly a year later, Emma and I walked down to the lake. The sunset painted the water gold. I could feel the peace in the air, the kind that only comes when something is finally put to rest. Emma walked beside me. No crutches now, just the gentle limp that reminded me of everything she had been through. "Do you think it's finally over, Dad?" she asked. I paused, thinking about everything we'd endured, the pain, the fight, the truth. "Almost," I said. "Some things take longer to heal than broken bones. But we're getting there." She nodded, slipping her arm through mine as we headed home. When I look back at everything that happened in Lakeview, I realize how close we came to losing everything. But we didn't. We didn't lose our faith in each other, our sense of justice, or the courage to keep fighting for what was right. And in the end, that's what mattered the most. Emma still walks with that limp, but she wears it proudly. Every scar on her legs tells a story she refuses to hide. And as I stand next to her, watching her smile at the camera once more, I'm reminded that we fought for this, for her future, for justice, and for the light of truth to shine in even the darkest places. If the story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more updates. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you have your own story of standing up for what's right, let us know. Your courage could inspire others to do the same.